He is Mark Stewart, Badgers reporter for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and a lot has happened since we last chatted. The Badgers lose a close one to number one Oregon, but that's already a subplot. They have let go offensive coordinator Phil Longo. It was his second year with the team. Of course, it was a high-profile hire when he came in with new head coach Luke Fickell, had come from North Carolina, running the air raid offense. Just has not worked out here. The Badgers offense still has not really found another gear, and with 2 games left, they're going to try something different. There's a lot to unpack here. The decision itself, Luke Fickell's press conference the day after on Monday, which was kind of something. I mean, I want to talk about that too, but just right off the top, what does it mean for the program to have moved on here from Phil Longo? Again, respected coach, but with 2 games to go, the timing is really interesting. The maneuver itself seems like it was always kind of headed in that direction, but I don't know. I don't really know what to make of it. How would you, off the top, how do you look at this decision and what it means for the Badgers?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised. I guess no one's completely surprised that they made a change at offensive coordinator. But, the timing of it is like, doing it, in the middle or even toward the end of the season sort of reeks of, desperation in a way,
Yes, it does.
So it does make you wonder what was going on there. My thought is that, Fickell and Longo just didn't, from a working relationship standpoint, maybe that wasn't, what Fickell wanted, because when you ask Luke, okay, well, what do you want in an offense moving forward? He talks a lot about the same things they have now. So I don't think it was a perspective of Phil Longo coming up with, packages or whatever that, Fickell didn't want. I just reading between the lines, it just seemed like, from a working relationship standpoint that maybe they weren't on the same page. I took from, there was a point in the press conference where Luke kind of lays out his Sunday and he says he, in essence, he made the decision and then he came in and he was going to talk with Phil Longo. And, from that, it was kind of decided that, hey, now it's the time to part, which, the way he worded it made me think, well, maybe there was a chance that, Phil would finish out the year. I mean, we're only, 2 weeks out, from finishing the regular season. And then you could, make a change at the end of the regular season, whether the Badgers make it to a bowl game or not. So I just think there was, they just weren't fully on the same page there, with maybe how the offense was run. Maybe it wasn't what they were running as much as, how it was being run.
It's just such a weird thing here because they need 1 win of these last 2 games against Nebraska and Minnesota to go to a bowl game. I think that bowl streak is a big deal for people within the program. 22 consecutive years of making a bowl game. Now, I think the bowl games themselves are kind of afterthoughts across college football. You seldom get full, except for the college football playoff games, of course, you seldom get full rosters of players. Backups end up playing, and it ends up becoming kind of an exhibition. But these 2 games that are left are not insignificant. And moreover, you had, and this dovetails into that Monday press conference where Luke Fickell was pretty feisty about things, didn't initially say who would take his place. If you don't have somebody to take his place, that boggles my mind. Now, I fully believe that he has a structure in mind. It's just to sort of keep that under wraps or whatever. I mean, it just kind of strikes me like why do it now when there are 2 very meaningful games left? Nebraska and Minnesota are kind of rivals, if nothing else. Does it really give you a head start on finding that next offensive coordinator to let him go 2 weeks early? Like honestly, it feels like echoes of what happened when Paul Christ was very suddenly fired a couple years ago. There is that sort of undercurrent of, did this just happen kind of off the cuff? Like it was maybe building in that direction, but they got into a conversation and decided, yeah, this is just the way to go. Like that feels very sudden for a Division I college program. And I'm still kind of struggling with that. Even if this is how it was going to end, I don't know if this is the right time to do it, man.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I listened back to, Fickell's press conference, and it sounded like, when he came in to work that day, he had already decided that he was going to make a change. And if you're, maybe the conversation goes, if you're Phil Longo, well, if you're telling me this now, one, how am I supposed to function?
Oh, that's a good point.
At my peak performance, when I know, this is coming down the road. And then two, if, you're going to let me go, then maybe it's just best to, cut the cord now. And then everyone knows, because, the next step is, okay, people in the coaching business. I'm sure Luke Fickell has a short list of people that behind the scenes or whatever he's reaching out to this, at some point to see if they're interested in the position. But then too, it kind of gets out there that, okay, Wisconsin's looking for a coordinator in case there might be some candidate that, maybe Fickell wasn't thinking of that, reaches out. But if Luke comes in and says, hey, I don't think this is working, like I said, if I'm Phil Longo, I'm like, well, okay, well, let's end it now. I just don't know how that would work if you tell somebody that, we're moving on at the end of the season, and there's some people stick around. There have been coaches who stick around, and some coaches, just from the conversation, you probably feel like, okay, this isn't going to be the best situation, from a team standpoint. So I do think something, like that may have happened, because to me, like I say, it was clear that, it wasn't that Phil and Luke were having a discussion about him staying on or tweaking things. It was like, it seemed to me that Luke had already made up his mind. He was just going to talk to Phil about his decision.
This press conference that Luke Fickell gave, I don't know what the terminology is quite to call it, but uncharacteristic is something that I thought of. I am so impressed and have always been impressed with how Luke Fickell handles post-game press conferences, particularly after losses. I think he has a pretty unique ability to articulate smoothly both the emotional and the practical side of things. And I've always thought he's a really good diplomat. He's a really good representative for a program, which I think is what you need when you're trying, when more than ever you have to sell kids on your program, in some cases, literally with money. I think he's a really good ambassador that way. This was very different, where he was reluctant to answer questions and kind of cagey and kind of trying to steer the conversation toward Nebraska, which I get that's the typical, that's the schedule, but like, come on, you just fired your offensive coordinator, who is the number 2 guy in this program. So, you said that word desperation. This is the first time where I felt like you could tell that the pressure is on, and not that we're blind to the idea that there's always pressure in college football, but I don't know if you make more of it than just it was a hot button issue at the time, and you give him, of course, probably give him a pass here, but this is the first time where I feel like I can detect Luke Fickell thinking, man, things have got to change, or the head coach will be the change, or something even bigger than that. I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that, Fickell is pretty, I would say he's pretty good with the press, in terms of, the questions, he's asked. My feeling as a reporter is, okay, I can ask the questions, but I can't dictate your answer, so I can't get upset that, you might not respond how I'm expecting you to respond. And I think from, my impression of Luke's perspective is sort of the opposite, that, okay, he can't control the questions, so he doesn't get caught up in getting frustrated over what people may ask. And I think he does kind of understand that, we're there to do a job. And yeah, for the most part, he is pretty good. I mean, I think, after losses, it's, a lot of times he doesn't sugarcoat anything. I can't think of the word he said after the Oregon game. Was it crushing?
I think it was crushing.
Yeah, and that's something sometimes you don't really hear from a head coach, right? That a loss is crushing. And I thought that was, a moment of, honesty as a coach. So, I mean, yeah, I guess hey, he's human, so maybe he just had a bad, was having a bad day. my other thought, I was thinking, well, when he was asked about, okay, who's going to be calling the plays, my thought, well, two things. One, and I didn't get a chance to do this yet, but I was going to do this at some point. But I thought when, earlier this year, Wisconsin played Purdue, right, the same week that Purdue changed offensive coordinators.
Graham Harrell, that's right.
Yeah. And I thought that Luke at the time, when he was asked about it, made some kind of throwaway comment at the time about, well, I don't know why you would say who's calling the plays. I thought he said something to that effect. And I haven't gotten a chance to go back and listen to that press conference to see exactly what I heard. But even if he didn't say that, why, I guess you would think, well, what's the big deal in saying who's calling plays? Especially in this case, maybe you don't want to, elevate somebody you want to keep on your staff. Last year, Wisconsin's receivers coach, Kenny Guyton, was the interim offensive coordinator at Arkansas when Dan Enos got fired. Mm-hmm. Then, Arkansas hires Bobby Petrino as your offensive coordinator. And, all of a sudden after 3 years, Kenny moves on. Now, are those related? Was there, something that he thought maybe he should have gotten a crack at the job? I don't know. But if you don't name someone, then, I guess I was thinking, if I'm thinking like Fickell, maybe that's a way of not maybe elevating someone from a public standpoint so that if you want to keep them, maybe it's easier for that person to stick around.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, I think who knows, like I said, he didn't really get into, he didn't get into that. And he was a little, someone asked him is Braden Locke your starting quarterback? And he was like, well, like, of course, it was kind of like that one seemed to annoy him a little bit.
But again, like, that's such a legitimate question. I mean, Braden Locke has not been good, so I can't imagine that they're just like absolutely rubber stamp. He's the guy to go in. Now, I don't know if they got a better option. I think Braden Locke is your starting quarterback, but I mean, it's a fair question. I think it's a good question.
Yeah, and so this is the other thing. A week ago they had the whole Jack Del Rio mess, where Jack Del Rio, he was on staff as kind of a consultant, senior analyst, something, I forget his title.
Senior analyst,
gets the DUI and resigns. So last Monday, Luke comes in and offers a statement, about a 2-minute statement or whatever, and then the questions actually move on to Oregon. Now I think. I'm wondering, if when he comes in this time, is he thinking that that's going to work this time? He's going to say his piece about, the coordinator, and then we're going to move on and start talking about Nebraska. I mean, I think maybe that was his hope, but, from a team dynamic standpoint, your offensive coordinator is, a huge piece of, what you do. So I think some of that was hoping that, he could kind of steer us off of the topic.
Sure.
Because I don't think, he wanted to get into, the more he talks, the more details slip out about, okay, well, why did this happen?
Yeah. And, I mean, I think obviously finding out who the offensive coordinator is next year is a whole separate conversation, which will be something that has to be followed, and who the quarterback is going to be, because it seems kind of abundantly clear to me anyway that Braden Locke is probably not going to be here after this season. And I could be wrong about that, but it sure seems like they've kind of seen what he can do at this point, and it's not necessarily put them in position to win. I do want to talk briefly about this team and the performance against Oregon and actually Nebraska, because again, these are two pretty important games ahead of them. And I don't know if you feel different. I mean, 16-13 against the number one team in the country is really good. Even if your offense did not perform great, especially at the beginning and the end of the game, even if I think Oregon had just a subpar game by their standards, that was still an impressive showing. The defense showed up big time. And I don't know if that gives you more, you're more encouraged for Nebraska is going to be just as desperate for a bowl game, a bowl game berth as the Badgers are, if not more so, because they have not been to a bowl game in quite some time. This is a meaningful game for Nebraska too. I could go either way on whether or not I think Wisconsin will win either one of these last two games, but give me your thoughts, just a couple thoughts from what you saw in Oregon and how you think this shapes up going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, I thought that was a pretty impressive performance, especially coming off the Iowa game. That was a nice bounce back performance. I think what we saw, Wisconsin versus Oregon, is more of who the Badgers are than Wisconsin versus Iowa. And who are the Badgers? The Badgers right now are a team that can put up a decent fight, can hang in there against really good teams. But I don't think right now they haven't shown that they've got the playmaker or two that can put you over the top. Dylan Gabriel didn't have a great game for Oregon, but he made a couple plays, 2 or 3 plays that really were huge for them and really kind of dictated them winning the game. And, Wisconsin just doesn't have that right now. And similarly, Penn State just had guys that, as hard and as well as Wisconsin was playing, they were a step or two better. So I think that's where Wisconsin is now. I don't think, like I said, I don't think they're what we saw at Iowa. So that was one thought there. You talk about Braden Locke. If Wisconsin doesn't get that, I think it was an illegal man downfield penalty where Braden Locke threw the touchdown that was called back
with his left hand.
We could be talking
about it. You're right.
A whole different scenario there. And honestly, I think it was a illegal man blocking downfield, if I'm correct. But at the time,
he sure looked over the line to me on top of it. Like, that's what I thought the call was going to be, but whatever. Like, it didn't work.
Yeah. Whatever it was, I thought, okay, I wouldn't blame the lineman for thinking Locke was going to run, because I thought he was going to run. Then all of a sudden he just, flipped, did a Brett Favre and, flips it off with his, his other hand. So that was a thought, like how close they were to actually, winning that one. This week at Nebraska, I think one of the things that Luke, Fickell did mention as he's trying to turn the page during this press conference. And by the way, he was only asked about this coordinator thing about 10 and a half, 11 minutes. It wasn't like, 20 minutes or whatever.
Sure.
But, I think on his mind too is Wisconsin played well against Penn State, and you think, okay, man, they're primed to go on the road and play well. And they didn't. So Wisconsin plays well against Oregon. You think they're primed to go play well on the road, and I'm sure that's got to be a concern. Now, do you fire if you're really concerned, do you fire your coordinator right now? I guess it had to, it had to be. But, as some people have told me, I'm bad at predicting outcomes of these games. But I don't know. I think Wisconsin can do it. I think Wisconsin has been. If you look at what they've done against, Penn State and in Oregon, and in the 3 games before that, over the last 6 weeks, I think Wisconsin's body of work is better than Nebraska's. Nebraska got off to a really good start. They beat Colorado, which was playing well right now. And since then, they've kind of tapered off. 5 in a row, 4 in a row.
Yeah,
they've lost 4 in a row right now, and almost lost at Rutgers. So, my prediction is probably going to lean toward Wisconsin this week. Like I say, they definitely got to get it. You don't want to wait till Minnesota, where weird things can happen, even at home, to wrap up this, get that 6th win and open yourself up for bowl eligibility.
Yep, I think we're going to disagree, because I think Nebraska is going to want this one really bad. So we've been doing a good job of going different directions. Even I picked Oregon, or I picked Wisconsin to beat Oregon in a twist, in an upset twist. Yeah. Did not get what I wanted, but that was it was an expected outcome. The score, not so much. We'll see if the Badgers can, in fact, use that as a springboard, as opposed to what you're talking about, what happened between Penn State and Iowa, which the players talked a lot about after that game. They cannot repeat that transition into something much, much worse, especially if they want to be bowl eligible. He's Mark Stewart. Read everything he has at jsonline.com. He'll be following, of course, whatever updates we have on the offensive coordinator spot, who the interim person will be, if there is a true interim person, and, of course, all the coverage leading into this game against Nebraska. Happy Thanksgiving, Mark. If I don't see you beforehand, I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, hey, same to you.